Now, a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled, and they told the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. And all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with a great fear. So he got in the boat and he returned. And the man whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." He went away proclaiming throughout the whole city just how much Jesus had done for him. The word of the Lord. You may be seated. It seems odd. Last week we were talking about superheroes, and now we're kind of moving into those horror films with the Exorcist and all that stuff. But it's important that we actually talk about this. We don't like to actually talk about exorcisms. And the reason for this has more to do with culture than really with anything else. There are still miracles that happen today. Wonders, works of power, where God intervenes into this broken world. And we can read about them if we just listen. Craig Keener, in his fantastic book, Miracles, lists a few, and I'm just going to take a few stories from within this book. A Nepali pastor, Meena K.C., heard of 3 girls, Pramila, Rita, and Sunita, who, bound by a hostile spirit, were mute for 3 years. They were released when she prayed for them, and the cure was so dramatic that their whole village came to know Christ. The 3 girls also began bringing others to Christ through their testimony. A South African psychology professor, head of the Department of Industrial Psychology at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in Port Elizabeth, explains his own former case of possession, with another personality controlling him, and institutionalization proving ineffective, until his spontaneous exorcism by a Christian. Keener writes that he had an opportunity while briefly visiting a country in Asia before lecturing in another location in 2007 to talk with some Chinese pastors. Although these pastors were not charismatics or Pentecostals, when Keener spontaneously asked if any of them had first-hand accounts of healings, several offered exorcism accounts. For example, one eyewitness recounted that in 1994, a woman could not remember her identity and began having hallucinations. When the believers prayed, 2 spirits began speaking to them through the woman. The spirits threw her down before them, crying, "Please leave us. We cannot bear to hear more about this Jesus." The spirits tried to negotiate conditions, finally settling on eating a meal through the woman. The possessed woman ate an inordinate amount of food, they say, and then the spirits left, never to return. Such practices are frequent in Africa. In many African countries, 1/3 of Christians claim to have witnessed exorcisms. And in some places, that figure rises to roughly half in places such as Uganda and Mozambique, and 65% of people in Ghana claim to have seen it, with 74% in Ethiopia also saying that they have witnessed this. And so we have to ask ourselves, Not what's wrong with these people, but what's wrong with us? Why doesn't this happen here? And really, it's the way our culture explains things. If you live in a culture where miracles are possible and exorcisms happen, God is going to use that tool to bear witness to his healing power. But if you live in a culture where that's skeptical, God's going to use other tools. And we do live in a culture that is highly skeptical of demon possession. And the reason is because of what philosophers and scientists will call circular reasoning. Circular reasoning is where A equals B, and therefore B equals A. Let me give you an example. The example here would be miracles can't happen because we don't have any cases of miracles happening. And when a case happens, where a miraculous case, something nothing else can explain, well, we know it's not really a miracle because we know that miracles never really happen. And round and round and round it goes. Folks, that's not a statement of logic. That's not looking at all of the evidence. What that is a statement of faith. That is a statement of faith, and it's not a statement of logic. Why are we so different? We are so different because we have a different culture. And so because of that, this story seems so foreign to us, doesn't it? We don't really want, it makes us uncomfortable to even talk about it, but let's go through this and we'll see what God is really trying to say here in his holy words. The passage in question has 3 points for us to remember, 3 points. And it's about this man, this former possessed man. First off, we notice that he is cleaned. Second, that he is welcome. And third, that he is sent out. He is cleaned, he is welcomed, and he is sent out. Keep that in your minds. Keep that in your minds. We'll come back to that. Firstly, we need to talk about the setting. Jesus has now left the clean region. The clean region. Israel is a clean region. It's set apart. The word for holiness in ancient Hebrew is kadosh. And kadosh doesn't mean just holy, like what we think of as holy, like holy cow, as something just in addition or power. It means set apart. And it's set apart by the fact that it's supposed to reflect the glory of God. So this is kadosh. And so he's leaving the kadosh country. The kadosh country that's set apart. This is supposed to be set apart. In Exodus 19:6 we read that God declares over Israel, "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a kadosh nation," a nation set apart. Deuteronomy 7:6, "For you are a people kadosh to the Lord, set apart to the Lord your God, for the Lord your God has chosen you out of all of the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession." Deuteronomy 14:2, "You are a people kadosh to the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession, you out of all of the peoples who are on the face of the earth." Leviticus 20:26, "You shall be kadosh to me. For I, the Lord, am kadosh, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine." Isaiah 41:8-9, "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from the farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you, and not cast you off." This is not some offhanded remark that he is going into the Gentile regions. This is not an offhanded word. place that Israel is supposed to be set apart for the Lord. This is a story that God keeps telling His people. They are set apart. They are kadosh. And it is God who has the power to set them apart, not themselves. They cannot set themselves apart. God sets them apart. Now God in Christ, though, is doing something amazing. God is breaking the boundaries and blurring the division between what is set apart, what is kadosh, and what is just average. The whole world now, God is declaring is His. And it's amazing, isn't it? He can't be kept contained inside this little area, but now He is breaking the boundaries and going out to the land of the Gerasenes. He is going to the unholy places, the unset apart places, the unkadosh places. And what is He doing? He is being Himself to them and causing healing and restoration. He is now beginning to declare that all the world is His and not just some small corner. He wants it all. And He goes not to the head of the community like you and I would do. He doesn't go to the head of the community, some kind of, sort of, but not really clean person who managed to work his way up the ladder. No. But to the outcast of outcasts. A person so unbelievably unclean, unbelievably unkadosh, that it is beyond question when He works His power, what is going to happen. So the unclean man from the unclean land with the unclean spirits is cleansed of these many spirits. The Bible speaks of uncleanliness, and it talks about how uncleanly it is to be amongst the graves, to be amongst the dead. If we were to look at Numbers 19, we would learn that someone who has been around a corpse will be unclean no matter what they do for 7 days. If the person does not cleanse himself after those 7 days, he will be cut off from the entire community, and not in the good way. Now this man is not living in the nicest house in town, but amongst the tombs, amongst the dead. He is an outcast in the fullest sense of the word. Luther declares he had a lot of demons sitting in him, driving him. And so what Jesus does is He sets these demons inside an unclean animal, the pigs, and they are driven off the cliff into the abyss. Do not send us into the abyss, and what happens? They get sent into the abyss. Now, this Gentile town probably didn't get many visitors from their Jewish neighbors. They probably knew there were things going on over there across the lake, but they kept themselves to themselves, and they let the Jewish people keep to themselves as well. But now, they're watching this strange rabbi go directly up to a dangerous outcast. And what they see is amazing. There is no denial what has happened to this man. He is changed, metamorphosed, right in front of their eyes. And so what do? We're told they don't just go into the town. They flee into the town. The word the Bible uses is like someone fleeing an oncoming army. They flee into the town to report what they had just seen. Something has happened out there in the outskirts. Matthew 12:18 tells us that Christ will then report justice to the Gentiles. It's the same word for report that's used here. He is reporting justice. This is what God has commanded. God has commanded Jesus to do, is to report justice to the Gentiles. And what is He doing? He is reporting justice to the Gentiles. The disciples who come from John in Luke 7:22, when they come up to Jesus and say, John wants to know, are you the Messiah, or should we keep on waiting? And what does Jesus say? Report what you have seen, and lists all of the miracles and teachings. Some way, somehow, God is going to get his life-giving message across. God always gives us two choices, doesn't he? Always two choices. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Those are the two choices, and God will always do that. And he is intent. The God of the universe who created everything is intent on one thing: proclaiming salvation to everyone who has ears to listen and eyes to see, and even people who may not have either one of those. Now the people do have a choice, and they have heard the report. They have seen the man in his right mind. They can double down with what they know in fear, or they can go and try and learn what has caused this drastic and radical change, not just to one person, but because the community is so closely knit. What's happened to all of them? There is a change. And they, of course, begged Jesus to leave. All of them, except for this one man, who instead begs to go with Jesus in the boat. Now notice, he doesn't have a home. It says he's been living outside of his home for years, in the tombs. The tombs are the only one he knows. But the reaction of both Christ and the cleansed man are so interesting. A different translation puts it this way. Christ tells him, return to your home and describe what great things God has done for you. And so he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city what the great things Jesus had done for him. Folks, isn't that amazing? Here's a man, he's not just given his right mind, he's given his home back. He gets to go home. And Jesus is wandering, and he will eventually go home too. Not until his mission is complete. We live in an age that wishes to keep spirituality at arm's length. We're fine with the spiritualism of late-night hucksters and Shirley MacLaine, but real encounters really don't register with us. Our self-centered worldview, rather than our scientific inquiry, demands that we take nothing seriously that will challenge our place at the center of our own worldview. We also don't know what to do with people who have had a real healing encounter. We want to file it away into simple scientific categories, but are we able to do so? What if there is good and evil? What if there is one who can heal? What if you have seen it with your own eyes? Perhaps many of us are like those early Gentile citizens who simply want to get on with their lives, maybe with a holy nation just around the corner or next door, but certainly not one that intervenes in their lives. Life is pretty good. Why mess that up? Jesus' instructions to the man are interesting. The man sees that wherever Christ is, that is his home. Yet Christ has now declared that this man is to go home because his new home is Christ. And his home will become Christ's home. The man then goes away rejoicing. Rejoicing, we're told. For Christ has done more than free him from separation, but has declared that his home is wherever Christ is, and wherever he goes, Christ will be with him also. Because Christ is always present in his message, isn't he? We all, too, have been given a similar story. We were cleansed. We were welcome. We're sent out. We too have been healed and cleansed and restored to right relationship with God and our neighbor. This is not from our own doing, but because of the work of Christ invading our lives, sometimes very peacefully, sometimes like a raging torrent. Finally, we are sent out into our towns, our counties, and even our homes to declare that we were dead. We were dead and apart from God, but now we are alive and we are apart from death. We now have a choice about how we shall go home. Will we go home afraid of God, trying to reconstruct our world when this power is invading? Or will we go home rejoicing and proclaiming all that Christ has done for us? Amen.